I was 18 when it all started, a walking mess of rebellion and regret. My name's Scarlett, and back then I was the kind of daughter who made my parents whisper behind closed doors. I'd been skipping chemistry classes, sneaking out to empty parking lots with kids who smoked too much, and arguing with my mom over every little thing: dinner, curfews, the way she'd sigh like I was a lost cause. She'd tell her book club I was just going through a phase, her voice tight with that fake cheer she'd mastered. My dad, though? He barely spoke. He'd sit at the kitchen table, eyes locked on his phone, letting her do the talking. So when they sat me down one humid June evening and announced a family trip to Italy, I didn't buy it. Not at first. "It's a reset, Scarlett," Mom said, her manicured nails tapping the table. "Just the three of us. No distractions." Dad nodded, barely looking up from his screen. They dangled plane tickets like a peace offering: Rome, Naples, the Amalfi Coast. No siblings, no work calls, just us. I wanted to roll my eyes, call it another one of her staged fixes, but something in me softened. Maybe this was their way of reaching out. Maybe, after all the fights, they actually meant it. So I packed a suitcase, shoved my doubts into the side pocket, and let myself hope. If you haven't subscribed to our channel yet, I encourage you to hit that subscribe button and tap the bell icon to stay updated on all our latest stories. Your support means the world. If you find this video valuable, please give it a like. My fellow viewers and I would love to know where you're from. Drop your city in the comments below. Now, let's dive into this story. The flight was long, cramped, and silent. Dad slept. Mom flipped through a glossy magazine, and I stared out the window at clouds that looked like they were hiding something. When we landed in Rome, the air smelled like espresso and stone, ancient and alive all at once. The first few days were awkward but strangely warm. We ate gelato by the Tiber River, the kind that dripped down my wrist as I laughed at Mom's terrible Italian accent. "Grazie mille," she'd chirp, beaming for photos I'd reluctantly pose for. Dad trailed behind, snapping pictures of the Colosseum like he cared about history. One afternoon, as we waited for a tour bus, Mom grabbed my hand, her grip soft, almost hesitant, and I remember thinking, maybe this is it. Maybe we're turning a corner. By the time we reached Naples, the tension had softened, replaced by a fragile rhythm. We wandered narrow streets, dodging scooters and vendors shouting about fresh lemons. Mom bought a straw hat she didn't need, posing for a Facebook post captioned, "Family Healing in Italia." I smirked but didn't fight it. Dad even cracked a rare smile when I tripped over a cobblestone, catching my arm before I hit the ground. "Watch your step, kid," he muttered. And for a second, it felt real, like we were a unit again. The last morning, though, something shifted. We were set to fly back to California that afternoon. I woke up to the sound of waves crashing outside our hotel window, the room still dark except for a sliver of light sneaking through the curtains. Breakfast was quiet. Too quiet. Mom wore her favorite silk scarf, the one she saved for special occasions, knotting it with careful fingers. Dad sipped his espresso, staring at the cup like it held some secret. They exchanged a glance I didn't catch, quick and sharp, before Mom turned to me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "We're stepping out for one last coffee," she said, standing abruptly. "The cafe down the street has this blend I have to try. Won't be long. 10 minutes, tops." "Okay," I said, barely glancing up from my phone. I was texting my friend Riley about how the trip wasn't a total disaster. "Don't get lost." Dad grunted something that might have been a laugh, and they walked out, the door clicking shut behind them. I scrolled through my messages, the minutes ticking by, blissfully unaware that those 10 minutes would stretch into hours, and that the life I'd known was already slipping through my fingers. I sat on the edge of the hotel bed, thumb hovering over Riley's last text. "So, you surviving the fam bonding?" The clock on my phone ticked past 10 minutes, then 20. I frowned, glancing at the door. Naples buzzed outside, horns blaring, voices shouting, but inside, it was dead quiet. I tried Mom's phone, straight to voicemail. Dad's, too. They're probably just lost, I muttered, pacing the room. My texts didn't deliver. Blue bubbles turned green, then nothing. 30 minutes stretched into an hour. My stomach twisted. I grabbed my hoodie and bolted to the lobby, sandals slapping the tile. The clerk at the front desk, a guy with a patchy beard and a bored stare, barely looked up when I skidded to a stop. "Have you seen my parents? Room 214? He tapped something into his computer, then frowned deeper. "The couple from 214? They checked out this morning, paid and gone." My breath caught. "What? No, that's impossible. We're flying out today. I'm still here." He shrugged, already turning back to his screen. "Keycard's dead now. You can check the room if you want." I sprinted upstairs, heart hammering. The keycard flashed red. I shoved the door anyway. Locked. A maid down the hall watched me, her cart creaking as she rolled closer. "You need help?" she asked, voice thick with an accent. I nodded, frantic. She swiped her master key and the door swung open. Empty. My suitcase, my backpack, my passport, gone. The bed was stripped, the trash can cleared like I'd never existed. I stumbled back, hands shaking. Back in the lobby, I called again. Voicemail, voicemail, voicemail. My chest tightened, a sob clawing up my throat. I sank onto a stiff couch, scrolling through every contact. Mom, Dad, even Riley, begging someone to pick up. Nothing. A tourist in a loud Hawaiian shirt brushed past, muttering about the ferry schedule. "Saw a couple rushing to catch the private one this morning," he said to his wife, loud enough for me to hear. Looked stressed. My head snapped up. Private ferry? That wasn't our plan. Something crinkled in my hoodie pocket as I shifted. I reached in, fingers brushing a folded scrap of paper. I pulled it out. Mom's handwriting, sharp and slanted. "You're 18, old enough to figure it out." No love, no sorry, just those 8 words staring back at me. My vision blurred. I read it again, then again, waiting for it to make sense. It didn't. The room spun. They didn't forget me. They left me. I don't know how I got to the U.S. consulate. The streets blurred, scooters honking, vendors yelling, the sun too bright. I burst through the doors, sweaty and wild-eyed, clutching that note like it was evidence. A woman in a navy blazer sat behind a desk, her bun so tight it pulled her face taut. "Please," I said, voice cracking. "My parents, they're gone. They took everything." She took the note, scanned it, then typed something into her computer. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. She turned the screen slightly, her lips pressing thin. "Your return flight was canceled last night. Your name's been removed from their health insurance, their emergency contacts, everything." She paused, eyes flicking to mine. "I'm sorry. There's no record of you with them anymore." I stared at her, numb. "What do you mean, no record?" She softened, just a fraction. "Legally, it's like they've cut you out. I can file a report, but without ID, you're stuck unless we get more." I stumbled outside, the note crumpled in my fist. The air smelled like salt and gasoline, and I couldn't breathe. They didn't just leave me behind, they erased me. I sank onto the curb, knees to my chest, tears burning hot trails down my face. A woman with a stroller stopped, her brow creasing. "You okay, honey?" I shook my head, words trapped behind a wall of shock. She pressed a euro coin into my hand and walked off. That night I wandered back to the hotel, hoping, praying, for a message, a mistake, anything. The lobby was empty, the clerk gone. I slid down the wall by the vending machine, the hum of it buzzing in my ears. The note stayed in my hand, its edges digging into my palm. "Old enough to figure it out," I whispered, voice breaking. Out there, Naples laughed and sang, alive with people who belonged somewhere. And me? I was a ghost, left to haunt a city that didn't know my name. The first night alone, I didn't sleep. I curled up behind a pizzeria at the edge of Naples, tucked between a dumpster and a crumbling brick wall. The air reeked of burnt dough and rotting tomatoes, but the dumpster radiated a faint heat that kept the wind from slicing through me. I pulled my hoodie tight, the zipper digging into my chin, and wrapped my arms around my knees. Every sound, clattering bottles, a distant scooter, footsteps, jerked me upright, heart racing. I clutched that damn note in my pocket, too scared to unfold it again, too stubborn to let it go. By morning, my stomach gnawed itself raw. I hadn't eaten since that hotel breakfast, scrambled eggs and a croissant I'd barely touched. The pizzeria's back door swung open, and a tray of leftover crusts hit the pavement, scattered like bones. I waited, breath shallow, until the worker disappeared inside. My hands shook as I darted forward, snagging a piece. It was cold, stale, but I didn't care, until a shadow fell over me. I froze, mid-bite, and looked up. She was old, 60, maybe more. Gray hair spilling from a loose bun, flour dusting her apron like snow. Her eyes were sharp, cutting through me, but her mouth didn't twist into a scowl. She crossed her arms, sizing me up. "Thieves don't last long here," she said, her voice rough but steady. I dropped the crust, scrambling back. "I'm sorry, I wasn't—" She held up a hand, silencing me. "If you're hungry, you work, understand?" I nodded, too stunned to argue. Her name was Elena. She owned the place, a squat little joint called Forno di Napoli, and she didn't waste time on pity. She shoved a mop into my hands and pointed at the grease-slicked floor. "Start there. You eat when it's clean." I gripped the handle, the wood splintering under my fingers, and got to it. The mop sloshed through puddles of oil and sauce, my arms burning after 10 minutes. She watched from the counter, kneading dough with hands that moved like they'd done it 1,000 times. Hours later, she tossed me a slice of margarita, hot, dripping with mozzarella. I devoured it, sitting on an overturned crate by the ovens. The warmth hit my stomach like a lifeline. When the last customer left, Elena locked the front door and jerked her head toward a storage room. "You sleep there," she said, handing me a threadbare blanket. It was a narrow space, shelves of flour sacks, a flickering bulb, a cot that sagged in the middle. No heat, no comfort, but it had a door that locked. I sank onto the cot, the blanket scratching my skin, and stared at the ceiling. Safe. For now, that was enough. Days bled into each other. I learned to move fast, scrub counters, haul trash, dodge Elena's sharp tongue when I slacked. She didn't ask questions, didn't pry about the red rims around my eyes or the way I flinched at loud voices. But one night, as we stacked trays after closing, she broke the silence. "I lost someone too," she said, her voice low, almost lost under the clink of metal. I paused, a tray hovering in my hands. "You're not the only one fighting." She didn't look at me, just kept stacking, her shoulders hunched like she was carrying more than dough. I wanted to ask, who, how, but her face closed off, and I let it drop. The next morning, she left a hunk of focaccia by my cot, still warm, wrapped in a napkin. No words, no explanation. I ate it in silence, the salt stinging my cracked lips. It wasn't kindness. Not the soft, syrupy kind Mom used to fake for strangers. It was something harder, something real. Elena didn't need to know my story. She saw the hollow in my eyes and handed me a shovel to dig myself out. I stopped crying after that. Not because the hurt faded. It didn't. But because the work filled the space where tears used to live. I swept, I scrubbed, I carried bags of flour until my shoulders screamed. The pizzeria smelled like yeast and survival, and I clung to it. Out there, Naples moved on. Families laughing over pizza, couples strolling hand in hand. In here, I was nobody's daughter, nobody's problem. Just a girl with a mop and a cot, learning to breathe through the wreckage. Time blurred in that pizzeria. Days into weeks, weeks into months. I stopped counting the hours I spent scrubbing ovens or hauling trash. My hands toughened, calluses blooming where blisters used to bleed. I picked up Italian from Elena's customers. Gruff old men arguing over soccer, teens flirting over slices. "Grazie," I'd mutter, sliding change across the counter, and they'd nod like I belonged. Nights, I'd collapse on that sagging cot, the hum of the fridge lulling me into a shallow sleep. But something was shifting. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was restless. It started with a tablet, cracked screen, tossed behind a dumpster near the docks. I fished it out, spent hours prying it open with a borrowed screwdriver from the repair shop next door. When it flickered to life, I punched the air, grinning like an idiot. Elena caught me hunched over it one night, squinting at a fuzzy YouTube video about online GEDs. "What's that glow keeping you up?" she asked, wiping flour off her hands. "Building something," I said, not looking up. She snorted but didn't press. I signed up for the program, studied by the back door where the Wi-Fi stretched thin. Algebra equations danced under my fingers while the scent of garlic and oregano soaked the air. Every passing score, 72%, 85%, 91%, felt like a brick laid on a foundation I didn't know I was building. Then one evening, a tourist in a wrinkled polo lingered by the counter, muttering about cryptocurrency. "Bitcoin's a gamble, but the altcoins? That's where the money hides," he said to his buddy, loud enough for me to hear. I froze, mop dripping in my hand. A gamble. I had $50 stashed from tips, enough for a cheap coat. Instead, I threw it into some obscure coin I'd researched on the tablet. 2 weeks later, it quadrupled. That rush, it lit something in me. I wasn't just scraping by, I was moving. Elena noticed the change, the way I'd linger after closing, tapping furiously on the screen. "You playing accountant now?" she teased one night, catching me with a spreadsheet open, numbers glowing in the dark. "Just curious," I said, shrugging. But it was more than that. I was hooked. I devoured everything. YouTube lectures on trading, forums in broken English, a pirated PDF of some finance guru's memoir I found on a sketchy site. I read it twice, scribbling notes on napkins while the ovens roared. Then came the offer. A guy in a leather jacket slid into the pizzeria one night, eyes darting like he owned the shadows. He ordered a slice, leaned close, and whispered, "Heard you're good with numbers. I've got a job, offshore accounts, quick cash, no questions." My pulse spiked. The money he dangled could have bought me a plane ticket, a new start. But his smirk, the way his hand twitched toward his pocket, it screamed trouble. "Not interested," I said, voice steady. He lingered, then left. I exhaled, shaky but sure. I'd climb my way, not his. That no flipped a switch. I took bigger risks, legit ones. I sank my crypto winnings into a small Italian tech stock, watched it soar. By 20, I had $2,000 saved. By 21, I was advising locals, vendors needing loans, shopkeepers dodging taxes. Word spread. A fisherman paid me in cash to sort his books. A hostel owner traded me a week's stay to optimize her bookings. I registered a tiny consulting gig under a fake name. Nothing flashy, just enough to dodge questions. Elena saw it all. The new shoes I bought her, the way I paid her electric bill without a word. "You're not sweeping floors anymore," she said one afternoon, eyeing me over her coffee. I laughed, but she was right. I started sending money to shelters back in California, anonymous, always. Small amounts at first, then hundreds. I pictured my parents scrolling the news, seeing mystery donor AIDS runaways, never knowing it was me. It wasn't charity, it was a jab, a quiet screw you to the people who thought I'd break. Some nights I'd sit by the back door, tablet glowing, the note from Mom still tucked in my hoodie. "Old enough to figure it out," it said. I'd trace the words, not with anger, but with something fiercer, proof. I was more than the girl they'd left. I was the one they'd never see coming. And I was just getting started. By 24, I wasn't just scraping by. I was somebody. My little consulting gig had grown, a quiet empire built on late nights and calculated risks. I advised expats on investments, helped locals dodge financial pitfalls, even taught a handful of undocumented kids how to hustle online. Naples knew me as the girl who could turn pennies into euros, and I liked it that way. No spotlight, just results. I sent bigger checks to California shelters, thousands now, always unsigned, Part of me hoped my parents would see the headlines, wonder who was out there saving girls like me. The other part didn't care. One morning, Elena shuffled into the pizzeria kitchen, her glasses slipping down her nose. She dropped a crumpled U.S. newspaper on the table, coffee mug in hand. "You recognize this?" she asked, tapping a small black box in the corner. I leaned over, squinting at the print. Foreclosure notice. A mansion in Malibu. 6 bedrooms, ocean view, the kind of place that screamed money. The address hit me like a punch. 1427, Seacliff Drive. My parents' house. The one they'd bragged about on social media after ditching me. Their new chapter in paradise. Now it was slipping through their fingers. I sat back, breath shallow. "They're losing it," I said, more to myself than her. Elena sipped her coffee, watching me. "You gonna let it go?" she asked, voice flat. I didn't answer right away. The paper stared back, daring me to move. I'd built a life from nothing. Clients, cash, a name that meant something. This was a chance to take back what they'd stolen. "No," I said finally. "I'm buying it." She nodded like she'd known all along. We flew to California under my business alias, Scarlet Consulting, clean and untraceable. Elena came along, posing as my assistant. The auction was in a sun-bleached parking lot outside a courthouse, the crowd a mix of retirees, advisors, and investors with slick tablets. I stood near the back, hair tucked under a cap, sunglasses shielding my eyes. Elena held the bidder card, her face stone cold. The auctioneer rattled off numbers, his voice sharp over the murmur of the crowd. "Lot 47, 1427, Seacliff Drive, starting at 1.2 million. The bids climbed fast. A guy in khakis and boat shoes, a developer judging by his smug grin, kept raising his paddle, glaring at us like we were trespassing. $1.5 million, he called, loud enough to turn heads. I whispered to Elena, "Keep going." She lifted the card, calm as ever. $1.6 million. His jaw tightened. The price shot up. 1.8, $2 million. He pushed to 2.3, sweat beading on his forehead. I leaned in. 2.5. Elena raised the card again, her hand steady. The crowd hushed. He hesitated, then dropped his paddle. The gavel slammed down. "Sold to bidder 92 for $2.5 million. We didn't cheer. Elena lowered the card, slow and deliberate, while the auctioneer moved on. I stood there, the sea breeze tugging at my cap, letting it sink in. Their mansion, the marble counters, the pool they'd posed by, the life they'd built without me, was mine. I didn't feel joy, not exactly. It was colder, sharper, like a blade I'd honed for years finally finding its mark. "You okay?" Elena asked, her voice low. I nodded, staring at the horizon. Better than okay. A week later, the notice hit their mailbox. Certified, legal, 30 days to vacate. I pictured them opening it, my mom's hands trembling, my dad's silence louder than ever. They wouldn't know who'd bought it, not yet. I'd used the business name, kept my tracks covered. But I knew they'd fight. They always did when the world stopped bending for them. Sure enough, their lawyer called Elena, thinking she was the buyer. "My clients want to negotiate," he said, voice oily. "They'd like to meet the new owner." I paused, phone pressed to my ear. "Set it up," I told her. She raised an eyebrow but didn't argue. The meeting was locked in. A small real estate office in Malibu, neutral ground. I didn't tell Elena my full plan, but she knew me well enough to guess. As we left Naples, I packed light. Just a navy blazer, sunglasses, and that crumpled note from 6 years ago. They'd see me soon. And when they did, I'd make sure they understood. The girl they left wasn't gone. She'd come back stronger. The real estate office was a sterile box on the edge of Malibu. Beige walls, fake plants, a clock ticking too loud. I arrived 10 minutes early, dressed in a navy blazer, hair pulled back tight, sunglasses perched on my head. I sat across from an empty chair, hands folded, calm as the ocean outside. Elena waited in the hall, clipboard in hand, ready to play her part. The clock hit 2 p.m. 2 minutes later, the door creaked open. Mom walked in first, a beige cardigan draped over her shoulders, oversized sunglasses hiding half her face. She looked thinner, fragile in a way that felt rehearsed. Dad followed, clutching a worn leather folder, his shoulders hunched like he was bracing for a storm. They didn't see me. Not really. They shuffled to their seats, nodding stiffly at the empty space where they expected some faceless buyer. I let the silence stretch, thin and sharp, until Mom cleared her throat. "We're here to discuss the house," she said, voice clipped. I reached up, slow and deliberate, and slid the sunglasses off my head. Their eyes flicked to me. Mom's lips parted, a tiny gasp slipping out. Dad blinked twice, then looked down, fast, like he could unsee me. "Scarlett?" Mom whispered, her hand twitching toward her chest. I didn't smile. I didn't move. "You left me," I said, voice steady, cutting through the room. "In Naples. No money, no ID, no goodbye." She flinched, sunglasses slipping down her nose. We thought you'd hate us less if we just..." Her words faltered, barely audible. "Disappeared?" I finished for her. "You didn't just disappear. You erased me." Dad's hands tightened on the folder, knuckles white. Mom's eyes darted, searching for an exit. "It wasn't like that," she said, louder now. "You were impossible. Always defiant, always fighting. We were drowning, Scarlett. You were dragging us down." I nodded once, slow. "You were supposed to be the lifeboat," I said, "not the ones who throw people overboard." She shrank back, but something flickered in her eyes. Fear, maybe shame, before it hardened. I turned to Dad. "Say something. Look at me and say it wasn't your choice." He opened his mouth, closed it, then finally rasped, "Your mother thought..." I cut him off. "I don't care what she thought. You didn't stop her. You let her erase me." He flinched, eyes dropping again. Then he spoke, voice dry and brittle. "We were in debt. Bad debt. They offered to wipe it if we gave you up. We didn't go through with it, but we couldn't take you back either." My stomach lurched. I leaned forward, nails digging into my palms. Gave me up? To who? He wouldn't meet my gaze. "Doesn't matter." We walked away instead. I stared, the room tilting. They'd planned to sell me, trade me like a bargaining chip, then chickened out and left me anyway. I stood, calm, controlled, and slid the signed deed across the table. "Well, I survived," I said. "And now I own the house you live in." Mom blinked, dazed. "You're bluffing," she breathed. The paper trembled under her fingers as she scanned it. My name, my signature, their address. Elena stepped in from the hall, face unreadable, clipboard poised. "We'll need the keys within 30 days, she said, voice cold and professional. "You'll get the move-out timeline tomorrow." Mom's head snapped between us. "You can't do this. We're your parents." Her voice cracked, desperate. I stared at her, unflinching. "No. You were my parents. You made your decision." She started to cry, small, staged sobs, the kind she'd used to win sympathy from neighbors. I didn't budge. Elena placed a slim envelope in front of her. "Legal instructions," she said. "Read them carefully." Dad's eyes were glassy, lost, but I felt nothing for him. Not anymore. I turned to leave. "Wait!" Mom called, her voice sharp now. "Why now? After all these years?" I paused at the door, hand on the knob. "Because I needed to see your faces when you realized I didn't need you to come back. I just needed you to know I did." I walked out, the door clicking shut behind me. Their excuses, their tears, they couldn't touch me anymore. Outside, the ocean roared, vast and indifferent, and I breathed it in. The girl they'd abandoned had just taken everything they'd built, and I wasn't done.